afternoon and welcome back, National Soccer League fans. It's good to be saying those words again. Introducing myself as your host, Matthew Hummel, and my two colleagues here, Morgan Davey and Benjamin Hoover. We're here today to talk about the upcoming season. It seems like just a few weeks ago that the previous rendition of this league was concluding, but we are back in action due to a shortened summer window. So we've got limited time to preview and profile teams and players for you ahead of the draft that is right around the corner. So going to go through these teams one by one in reverse order of where they finished in the season table last season and talk about some of their strengths, their weaknesses, and what they need to do in this draft to plan for the future of their franchise. Morgan, Ben, good to have you back along. Let's dive right in. So, as we all know, the last place team in the league, the Brooklyn Boomers, had an absolutely diabolical season after making the playoffs previous year. It was a rather sudden and astonishing fall from grace. So obviously that number one pick is theirs and a lot that they could do with it. Morgan, talk us through some of the needs that they have to try and improve the current squad and some players they can maybe look at to set up to fill positions for the future going forward.
Yeah, happy to do so, Matt. So first, we're going to start all the way to the back. They have a lot of needs here, so they definitely need a goalkeeper. And
looking at the wrong team, bud.
You said, the Boomers.
So, Morgan, what can you tell us about the Boomers and what potential positions they would need to fill with their number one draft pick?
Yeah, they don't have a crazy amount of needs, but they're definitely going to need a center attacking mid. That is for sure. That would be super helpful for them in this new season. They're also going to need a center forward. That's going to help with that attacking. And lastly, the center back is needed. So a lot of needs in the central area on the pitch.
Absolutely. Trying to strengthen that spine or backbone of the team is a need, especially after the sudden and surprising transfer swoop from the Conductors, acquiring Sergei Kalishnikov seemingly overnight without anyone having any idea. An absolute blockbuster deal that has been pulled off. We'll come back to that later, but it does leave a void in the front of the Boomers lineup. So again, needing to strengthen there. Morgan, what are some other things that you look at this franchise, you said, that are positives they have in the middle of this free agent offseason that can help bolster their roster?
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of, they have a great draft position. I mean, that's going to be super helpful for them. There's a lot of really good people here in the draft this time around. So that's very good to have. And then also they have a lot of cap space. I don't really know what that means, but they got it. So that's awesome.
Very well said.
Money to spend.
Yeah, they got a lot of money to spend.
Actually, they don't. Their transfer budget's quite poor. One of their constraints, you could actually say.
But their cap space is good, which means that they can sign a lot of players to a lot of lengthy, lucrative contracts.
Exactly. That hit the nail on the head there, Ben. Well said. Now, of course, it is always going to be hard to try and persuade players to join your team when you finish dead last in the previous season. But there always will be some willing free agents, potential transfer acquisitions that could go through. We'll have to wait and see. Of course, the transfer window will remain open up till a week after the conclusion of the draft itself, which will be on August 2nd for those of you who will be tuning in live to that. Now, speaking of the draft, we brought in Ben, our expert analyst of anything surrounding the National Soccer League draft. So, Ben, what do you think about the strategy of having the number one pick? Do you make a big splash and take the number one star, or do you look to maybe trade down with another team and, spread the wealth, diversify the portfolio? Is it situational? Does it depend on the team and what the current squad looks like? What would you recommend?
It's very situational, especially for a team like the Boomers, where their decline this past season was not really a surprise. They've got a lot of glaring holes to fill across the board. So you could definitely see them trading back in this draft class because they just need quality depth across the board. However, there's much that can be said about having this number one overall pick and the plethora of talent there is at the top of the draft board. You've got players like Marcus Gross and Roy Pedro Martins, Leonardo Becker. All of these players are going to be sure to make differences on the field right from the get-go. So you could see them reaching for any one of these stars and begin building around them or trade back. Either way, they need help.
It certainly is a star-studded top three, one of the strongest, draft class that we've seen in recent years. Of course, the first ever player with a graded 99 potential with Rui Pedro Martins. But again, a little bit of a wild card prospect. Not sure exactly how he's going to pan out. And again, Ben, do you think the the transition of Kalashnikov to the Conductors, maybe does that give anything away as to the potential plans? Are the Boomers going to look to draft a striker to replace him?
It definitely looks like an out with the old, in with the new type strategy. They're the Boomers, pardon the pun, are blowing up the team and are looking to start from scratch. So really excited to see where they decide to moving forward into this upcoming season. They could be exciting to watch moving forward.
General consensus around the league, GMs and executives, is that Marcus Gross is the potential #1 candidate for the Boomers. Fits the franchise well, but we'll have to see. You never know what exactly will happen. Are the Boomers playing a little bit of a cat and mouse game? We'll find out. We've got to move it along to our next team on the list, and it is the languishing Orcas, who have never had a winning season in just their 3-season career, but of course, looking to maybe make some improvement. They get Edmund Hron as their #1 pick in last year's draft. Looking to add to that, Morgan, what kind of players do you think they might bring in with this #2 pick overall?
Yeah, they're going to need, a good amount of depth here in this draft. So starting with, they're needing a right mid, right wing player to really help out on that right-hand side. They're a little bit weak over there. So having someone there would be super, super helpful. And then kind of on the same bit, the other side of the pitch, left mid, left wing would be very, very helpful if they can get that. So they're really looking for some good wing action on both sides. And then lastly, they could use a good striker, a lot like a lot of the other teams here. I'm not allowed to talk about this, but could they want Cifi? That's not a draft, but
they certainly wouldn't be the only ones. And of course, with the Orcas having a league high 6 players released to free agency this offseason, they're certainly going to be busy, likely in the free agent market as well as in this draft. So, Morgan, what are some other things they have going for them as far as strengths and things to keep in mind that could be constraints for them in this draft as we see it?
Yeah, I mean, they're similar to the Boomers because they didn't really do that well last season. So they have, for their strengths, great draft position, which could be super, super helpful. And then they also have a lot of cap space to work with. But then on the other hand, their constraints, prestige. They don't look very attractive to anyone who's being drafted or otherwise. They don't really have that prestige there. So that could be a big constraint for this season.
Yep, certainly a valid point. It's something that all these teams do struggle with at the top end of the draft. Not always a positive thing in that regard. Now, Ben, Morgan mentioned the position as right mid, right wing. It almost seems like a natural shoe-in for Rui Pedro Martins. Again, one of the arguably most exciting players in the class or in any class of all time. Is he the obvious choice here at #2 for the Orcas, or are we missing something here?
I think it's hard to pass up that potential. If you just see, the promise that he's been showing at the youth levels, you just know there's a great chance for him to be successful here at the next level. And, speaking of prestige, this could be a great opportunity to turn this lipstick pig of a franchise into a prize-winning salve. So we'll see, but I do think that Rui Pedro is going to be the pick here at #2.
We'll have to wait and see, of course, but that is, again, the general consensus around the league. We'll have to wait and find out just, let's see, 12 short days from now. So we will have it all on the National Soccer League channel for you. Those are the top 2 teams, and then the Conductors we have here rounding out our top 3. And it's been an interesting offseason for them. Again, the sudden and surprising signings of both Sergei Kalashnikov and Willie from the Wyvern Riders. Nobody saw these moves coming, but 2 big statement signings that they've added to their roster and looking to make another splash here with the #3 pick. Morgan, now that they've shored up some of those offensive roles, what are some other areas on the pitch they could look to strengthen?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of have a lot of need here in the back. So they're really needing a right back and a left back for sure. Like you said, they got some offensive holes plugged in, but they really need to get that right back and left back there, as well as the center back. So really the whole back line is needed, as well as a center mid would be helpful. And lastly, a left mid and left wing would also be helpful. So kind of, mid all the way to back. There's a lot of needs there.
Another one of these newer teams, certainly, that has just kind of need across the board at every position. But again, exciting start to their season so far with the players they have brought in this window. But Morgan, talk us through some of, again, the constraints and as well as the positives they have to try and bring new players into the club.
Yeah, I mean, similar to the other top 3, they have great draft position and a lot of cap space. they also have a very good transfer budget, which is going to be helpful. But really, I would say their only constraint here is, again, the prestige. They're not, again, a very attractive club, but I don't necessarily think this will continue if they're able to, use those new signings as well as fill up some of these defensive holes here in the next season.
Yeah, certainly well said. But again, the prestige proving not to be the end all be all with bringing in those two top talent players. Again, it is certainly possible. So all that being said, Ben, we turn your attention now to the draft itself. Morgan highlighted, the need for and the lack of so far signing players in the back line, given how shoddy they were in that regard last season. Are the Conductors thinking about taking a defender here at number 3 overall? And if so,
I wouldn't put it past them. Though, to be fair, in this draft class, defense is a little bit on the lighter side. You have got some really good players, such as Patrick Schinkel, who could be the pick here, which might be the wisest choice. But beyond that, there is really slim picking. So if Schinkel, by some miracle, goes ahead of the Conductors, which likely won't, as priorly discussed, I could see that being the pick. On top of that, though, you could just go for talent. And Zimun there, who's number 5 on our draft board, would be a good option. See, previously he was thought of to be the potential number 1 overall pick, but has been since supplanted by other young hot talent who might be appearing to be a little shinier in the forefront of people's minds. But Zimun's still a threat on the field when he steps on the pitch.
Yeah, certainly. And the Conductors have shown no fear so far in playing this dark horse role in the offseason. No one really knows what they're going to do with this pick. We'll have to wait and see. This is where it gets interesting. Again, you mentioned Patrick Schinkel. He can play anywhere across the back line, and he's considered largely the most pro-ready defender in this draft class. So it certainly is not out of the question. And of course, as you mentioned, with the talent pool at defense being as thin as it is this season, we'll have to see if that is the pick, how that affects the rest of the draft, because it might create a sense of panic around the league that they're not going to be able to bring in top defenders with so many teams needing that position to be filled. So could be an interesting one. Another interesting one for you right here is the Minutemen out of Washington, D.C. Another disappointing season, and it goes from bad to worse. Their talismanic striker, Amit Sisman, denies a new contract extension, has hit the market as a free agent, and already has 10 plus clubs lining up for his signature, which is absolutely insane. But again, the Minutemen have to move on. They can't sit there and lick their wounds for too long. They've got to turn their attention to the future. Number 4 pick, still a pretty good position. Morgan, what are some roles they might look to address in this draft?
Yeah, so similar to, it seems like a lot of our teams are needing some help defensively and a little bit there in the middle. So they're needing a good, steady left back there, as well as a center attacking mid and center defensive mid. So they're really needing help there, a little bit defensively, and as you said earlier, a bit of the spine there of the team. So hopefully they can get that going.
Some good insights there, as always, from Morgan. We'll settle down there, bud. Regarding their potential positions they could address here. And some people might have been thinking we would have seen striker as a need with Sisman leaving, but the Minutemen have already moved to address that, bringing in Cesar Ballin from the Hydra, and a bit of a shock move for both parties. Ballin, a player that fell out of favor with that Hydra squad, but still is seen to have potential by many around the league, including the Minutemen, as we see here. So, Ben, is there any chance they double up here at the position and maybe draft another striker if one of those top 3 forwards are still available on the board?
There's always a potential to make that choice. Just with Ballin's up and down season, probably a little bit more up than people give him credit for last year. A lot of his flaws were definitely due to a lingering injury that kind of plagued him throughout. So should he not blossom as the Minutemen expect him to, I definitely could see them trying to find the heir apparent to Amit Sisman there.
Yeah, this is certainly where the draft gets a little bit squirrely at this point. Not really sure what's going to happen, and you're trying to weigh so many other options of teams before you. We haven't even talked about any potential trades yet for any of these teams, let alone. So we'll do our best to keep the cart on the tracks. But let's move on here to the Silverbacks. They are the 5th pick in this draft, which is, again, a pretty good selection. Morgan, talk us through some of the strengths and constraints they have around this offseason.
Yeah, so the Silverbacks, as far as strengths, are in pretty good position. They have good cap space, also pretty good draft position, which will be helpful. And then they have that money. They have that transfer budget, which will be helpful. And the only thing we're really seeing that might be an issue is that level of prestige just might not be there. But again, as you said earlier, that might not necessarily be that impactful in this draft or season.
Yeah, and another team that's, along with the Orcas, expected to make a lot of moves in free agency to augment their draft position as well. So what are some areas on the field that they really need to shore up? They signed a ton of free agent forwards last season. None of them really stuck. Are there more need at the front for the Silverbacks? Who is it?
Yeah, I mean, oh, wait, it's me, right? They're needing, you know, kind of on both sides, a right mid, right wing, a left mid, left wing, a right back, and a center back. So they're needing really strong players on both sides, as well as some helpful people there in the center, just to make sure that we can stay strong defensively a little bit there in the middle.
Well, with that in mind, Ben, Morgan's positional analysis breaks it down. What do you think are some potential options for them to select at that number 5 spot here?
You know, I think it may just wind up being a best player available situation for the Silverbacks, or even more so, I could see them trading back in this draft class to really amass wealth. They've got a lot of plugs that they need to fill, and they have a lot of cap space. So you could really see them going for quantity over quality to really just bolster the squad depth. But if I were to pick any players, they're definitely looking at Leonardo Piatek, who is number 6 on our draft board. Jacob Piatek out of Poland could be a good option here, as well as Zimun, consistent and probably going to be prized by a lot of different teams, as well as Paul Latza, the goalkeeper out of Germany.
Yeah, goalkeeper is a position we haven't really mentioned yet, but Silverbacks certainly in the race, in contention rather, to think about going for a goalkeeper here. And Latza considered widely the best goalkeeping prospect we've seen in quite some time in the league. So another potential splash they can make there. Safe to say, the Silverbacks will have plenty of options at their disposal at that number 5 spot. And we move on to the Hydra in the number 6 spot, who are in a similar fashion here. Lots of options. They're heavily linked to a transfer with Amit Sisman in free agency, but of course, we'll have to see how that plays out. A lot of options on the table for him. So, Morgan, talk us through the Hydra. What makes them attractive? What makes them not so attractive?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of an interesting team because they don't have a lot of things that are making them stick out here. I'd say their main strength here is their draft position. They may not necessarily, you know, clinch the top of the draft, but they could get some pretty heavy hitters in there. As far as constraints, they don't really have any glaring constraints that are going to hurt them in the draft for this season, as far as I can tell.
A solid roundup there. And again, we'll have to see how the summer plays out with the forwards. Balin has already departed. They want to bring in Sisman, but more importantly, an internal struggle is that Aslan is stalling on a new deal after the disappointment of how badly the team performed last season. Obviously, anyone who watched the Hydra knows it wasn't necessarily the offense's fault, but rather the defense that let them down. So, Morgan, is that what they need to target in this draft, or are there other positions that we've overlooked here?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, they could really use some help defensively. I mean, they were a high-scoring team, but they also let through a lot of goals. So it'd be helpful to have, you know, a keeper. It'd be helpful just because, you know, we need a little bit of depth there. It'd be helpful to have a center back, a center attacking mid, then, of course, a right mid and a right wing. But yeah, we need help defensively for sure with the Hydra.
Well, we spoke earlier in the show about Patrick Schinkel and what he brings to the squad. Rumors around the league have told us that the Hydra are incredibly keen on bringing this player into the club if he is available. If he's not, Ben, what do the Hydra do? Do they look to trade down, or is there another prospect that they could maybe take instead of Schinkel?
You know, I really like Didier Munkunk at this pick, assuming that Paul Latza goes out. I think they definitely want to bolster that defensive side, and what better way to do that than to get a stone wall in the back? But I think that they really are focused down that Schinkel pick and expect them to trade back if he is gone at that 6th spot.
Have to see how that one plays out. Now, moving on to the number 7 team on the board. This is, again, where it starts to get a little bit dicey as far as trying to predict who will end up where, but we'll give it a shot anyway. So the Golden Horde are next up on our table. Morgan, let's run it again. Talk us through some of the strengths and weaknesses of this club.
Yeah, so they have a pretty good draft position, so that's going to be helpful for them, as well as that cap space and a high transfer budget. So all that should be super helpful. And it's the same formula. The only thing they're really lacking there is that prestigious, stance in the league.
Yeah, certainly well said on that front. And again, the Golden Horde following in the footsteps of the Conductors with a big surprise transfer swoop. Brandon Maynard out of favor, center mid for the Charioteers, gone overnight to the Golden Horde for a cut rate deal. Morgan, now that they've reinforced that attacking midfielder role, what are some other positions on the field they need to bolster here?
I mean, really, their whole back line, there's a lot that we need defensively. So they need that center back, right back, left back, a center defensive mid, and then, of course, a goalkeeper, much like a lot of other teams in the league.
Well, now that we've heard that, Ben, what is your thought on this pick here? What are the Golden Horde going to do?
I think after trading their star, but now defrauded goalkeeper Eichelman to the Charioteers, and then now getting Maynard from the Charioteers, it's been kind of a silk road between the two teams, between the Golden Horde and the Charioteers. So I really like them looking to replace Eichelman's production there, because he was quite good when he was there. So I'd look for them to be looking at Pal Latza or Didier Monkunk. I could also see them going forward, try to get a lot more firepower. So look for Jacob Piatek out of Poland as well. He's heavily linked to this team as well. So we could see what they decide to do based off of who's on the board.
Yeah, well done. All right, approaching now the end of the first third of the draft with the number 8 pick overall, and it is the Banshees, and they have got some interesting storylines going for them. Morgan, talk us through the strengths and weaknesses so far.
Yeah, as far as their strengths, they have a pretty good draft position and a good transfer budget. Their real constraint they need to watch out for is their salary cap. It's not looking good there.
Yeah, certainly an issue when you have teams with these star power forwards like Abraham, who signed long-term deals. We've seen it with the Green Galaxy and Rashad Mondragon as well. It does eat up a lot of your salary cap space. So it seems more likely than not that the Banshees will have a quiet free agency and look to bring in a potential starter here on defense, maybe something else. What comes across your mind, Morgan, when you think about the Banshees here at the number 8 overall pick?
So they're really needing to get some help defensively. So they really need help with left back, center back, right back. Also, again, they really need a keeper. But on the flip side, it would be nice if they can also get a decent striker in the mix.
Certainly some interesting options here at the position. Ben, what are your thoughts on who they might take?
As discussed earlier, this draft class is pretty thin at the top ranks for quality defenders, but around this draft position, you actually see it start to open up with 3 key players: Lucero Rodriguez out of Uruguay, Ilie Azque Unzueta out of Spain, and Declan Shaw. Any one of these could be a good fit to bolster up this Banshees defense at a reasonable price as well, because as we've mentioned, their cap space situation is troubling. So look for any of those to be some young, promising talent to hopefully bolster up what was a spotty defense at times this past season.
Yeah, certainly some good call-outs there. The names of players we haven't really mentioned yet, but those are all quality defenders in their own right. We'll have to see which one, if any of them, end up falling there for the Banshees. But the consensus widely is focus on defense again after focusing more offense-heavy last year, and we saw how that played out for not just the Banshees, but many teams around the league, one such as them, the Wyvern Riders, who had a really disappointing end of their season after being in control of their division for almost the entire season. It all crumbled away from them in the final few weeks, ending with a humiliating loss 5-1 to their division rivals, the Hydra, who had already been eliminated at that point. So they need to bounce back, and they need to do it quickly. And so far, it's not been a great offseason for them. They've lost Willie to the Conductors. There's been tumultuous talks this offseason about, the goalkeeper, Oglethorpe, graded as the worst goalkeeper in the entire league last season. And we have Richard Goethals from Belgium, the 6'5" keeper, on the bench on the final year of his contract. So we're hearing there's going to be an open competition for that goalkeeper spot. If Oglethorpe gets shaky, he might be out of there. But on top of that, there's some other things to consider here. But Morgan, first with you, let's talk about Wyvern Riders' strengths and weaknesses here.
Yeah, so as far as their strengths, they have a lot of budget, a lot of transfer budget to work with, a lot of money to throw around, and also a lot of cap space, a lot of prestige. They look real good. I mean, they're an attractive team, and their draft position. They have a lot of strengths here. So I'd be happy to be a Wyvern Rider fan in this draft. As far as their constraints, really not much that is very glaring for them. So it seems like they could be a pretty strong team here in the draft.
Yeah, certainly no joke about the transfer budget. 800 million is the rumored total of money they have to spend on new players. So Morgan, what are some areas of the field they might like to address with all that money that's just sitting there at the moment?
I mean, along with all their strengths, they don't have a lot of needs here. They do need a bit of help defensively. So with all that dough they got, they can try to find a good left back and a good right back.
Might be a good time, but potentially might be. We've heard rumors actually that there is interest in Suleiman Ur of the Green Galaxy, and it's proposed fee of around 100 million, which would be the third highest in the modern National Soccer League era, only behind Rashad Mondragon and Miguel Chavez. So that could be a big splash. Certainly something could happen. Ben, if it doesn't come in free agency, what do we think might happen in the draft at this number 9 position here?
You know, the Wyvern Riders are definitely targeting a bunch of different players. You know, definitely underperformed last season considering the talent that they have on the roster. So really not any glaring holes to fill other than the disappointing performance from Jonathan O himself. But you could really see them target more of those players in that lower bracket of or mid bracket of defense. So you've got players like Antonio Tarin, goalkeeper, a little bit less lauded than Didier Munkunk or oh goodness, Paul Latz out of Germany, who were expecting to be gone by this point. So you could see them target goalkeeper to really keep that competition going. They could also target defense. So Declan Shaw out of Great Britain could be the right choice here.
Yeah, some good highlights there. Let's move on to the double digits here. The Charioteers, another tough season for them. They have the number 10 pick. Morgan, talk us through once again strengths and weaknesses. Let's hear them.
Strengths, a lot of money. It's great. They have a great transfer budget. Maybe not as much as the Wyvern Riders, but still good. And then their constraints, just got to watch that cap space.
Certainly true. And a big part of the motivation behind the move of Brandon Maynard was the amount of the cap hit he was taking up. And that is part of why he was able to let go to the Golden Horde. Now, Morgan, this is a team that underperformed across the board last season, pretty much at every position on the field. But what would you say are the highlights of what they really need to fill in the most immediate future, considering the current roster?
Yeah, I mean, they need, much like a lot of the other teams, they need help defensively. So they're going to need that good center back, that good left back, and a good center attacking mid for sure.
Defense has been a position long overlooked in this team. But again, as Ben mentioned already, not the most star-studded class in terms of defenders, but Ben, could they potentially trade back here, do you think? Or would they stick with another midfielder, potentially a Maynard replacement at this pick at number 10?
You know, you could see them trading back here, but I actually see a pair of midfielders that we have not talked about at all this draft class who could really replace Brandon Maynard, really bolster up and just kind of build that core of the squad. And those two are going to be Giovanni Greco out of Italy and Ephraim Mendel, who are two different kind of players. I'd say that Ephraim Mendel out of Morocco is a little bit more pro-ready, a little bit more at the level that he's going to be probably later on in his career. But Giovanni Greco out of Italy is very exciting, has great potential to be super successful and perhaps to be one of the best midfielders in this league, which if you want to have a successful squad in the National Soccer League, it all starts from the middle. And I like those two choices here at pick 11.
Good highlights in the engine room that the Charioteers could look to draft. We'll have to see. Again, at this point, it's pretty much anyone's game as far as who goes where. But let's keep it going as we approach the midway point of the draft. Number 11 pick. It is the Condors out of California. Morgan, they missed out on the playoffs. Some would say unfairly, maybe even cruelly. We'll have to hear what the result of the National Soccer League Summer Meetings Summit was to see if that will be amended in future seasons. Again, finishing in the top half of the table, but not making the playoffs. Tough break for them, but what can they do to try to bounce back this season?
Yeah, I mean, with their strength being cap space and their constraints really not anything that I can see. They don't have any high constraints. So really what they're going to need to focus on is their needs, which their needs consist of a lot of, defensive needs. So we got a left back and a center back needed, and a goalkeeper would be nice for them. They also could use a little bit of help offensively with a center attacking mid.
Yeah, good call out there with the center attacking mid. Again, the big story of their offseason so far is the re-signing of Etienne Benazet, the French striker, to a club record $3 million a year deal, extending him and Maidet. Big money moves this offseason, but they need someone to pass the ball to these players. So, Ben, who are some players that might fit that role at that center attacking mid point of the engine room?
Yeah, as we just highlighted, Giovanni Greco here could be a great choice, a more attacking, forward attacking minded midfielder. You could also see Lance McKnight at the United States because he also a little bit more forward playing in his positioning and could provide more goal scoring opportunities. Likewise, Declan Shaw comes up on a lot of these draft boards. He's very consistent, been very consistent in these minor leagues, and looks to be a good plug and play player for this Condor team.
Certainly good options on the board still at this point. Again, the top talent in this class is very, very good. Even all the way down to the middle of the draft here where we hit the turning point, pick 12, and it's the Voyageurs, who also had just a heartbreaking way to end their season. Again, taking it to extra time and winning their game to get into the playoffs, only to have their hopes dashed on the rocks by the Manticores sneaking in at the final hour. So on top of that, of course, the bad news about Munir Erdogan, who had claimed at the beginning of the season he would not re-sign a new deal with the club if they did not make the playoffs. Fitting that it was him that scored the golden goal to put them into the playoffs at that time, and now he walks away as a free agent, heavily coveted by many clubs to try and get him into the squad. But how can they replace him? What needs do they have here, Morgan?
Yeah, so they are needing a left mid, a left wing, a right mid, a right wing. So we're seeing the needs on both sides there. And then they're also going to need help defensively. So that center back, left back, and of course a goalkeeper. Their main strengths with all this would be they have good cap space, but of course there are constraints here, and we kind of saw why Erdogan was kind of wanting to maybe walk away before, and he ended up doing so, is because their prestige is just really not there. They don't look like that attractive of a team.
Yeah, very, very prudent point you've made there for sure, and that does affect certain situations such as the one around Munir Erdogan. Here we go now looking into the future. Again, they let Mingo Morrison, the veteran journeyman forward, leave on a free agent deal as well. So a couple of holes across the board. Ben, what makes the most sense here on the draft board?
As we've said for a lot of these teams, I think it really comes out from the midfield. You could see players like Lance McKnight, Barakak Haddad, and Federico Mancini out of the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Italy, respectively. You could also see them trading back and going for depth as well, but really, I like a lot of the players that we see here. Any of the ones that we've listed before could fall to them here. Really, they need help in the midfield, kind of to replace that Erdogan position, because he was probably the best player on that team.
Yeah, well said. Poignant across the board. Now let's move on to the second half of the draft. Again, pick number 13 here. These are the teams that made the playoffs and were in that postseason competition. The Olympians, the first team out, as many expected they would. They really barely got in. Again, taking that divisional route, beating some less than ideal opponents to get that crown. But they made the playoffs and they re-signed Nima. And then the move that nobody saw coming, Cisco Mateu brought in from the Silverbacks. Shocking move. And not just the move itself, but the money, 82 million plus Kyle Venter for his signing. Apparently it hasn't sat so well with certain players like club captain Ezekiel Nemanja, though. We'll have to see. That could be a storyline to watch unfold over the course of the season, how those two can work together in the squad, if at all. All that aside, Morgan, talk us through some other strengths they have and other weaknesses we might have missed.
Yeah, I mean, with strengths, they got that money, as we have been talking about. That's super, super important in this draft. Constraints, really not any weaknesses here that we are seeing. All they're really needing as far as players go is a center defensive mid would be super, super helpful, as well as a right mid, right wing type player.
Yeah, certainly going to have to check the AI algorithms on this one, because they definitely do not need a center defensive mid here. But Ben, what are some positions that they might look to fill, especially as Morgan mentioned, maybe the right wing position with Crookshank and Mello not really performing up to the standard needed at this level in the league?
There's two players that I wanted to highlight here in this draft class, listed as strikers, but can definitely flex out wide. That's Jintek Shin out of South Korea and out of Namibia, both exciting, powerful, explosive players who are going to be able to really bring a lot of pace into what was a little bit more of a slow, tempo-oriented team. hopefully they're going to be able to feed in a lot more crosses into Nema, who had a renaissance season in coming back after signing from the Green Galaxy. I think there's a lot of potential there. They just need a lot more speed, a lot more youth, as the wings are looking a little bit slower right now.
Well said. Let's move on to number 14, the Pink Nightmare, getting to the business end of this draft now. What a season they had. Started out as the worst team in the league and then went on an unbelievable 7-game winning streak, with the coach making some bold choices, not among making Nasser Voitin's club captain and benching long-term striker Sean Colton, who is now expected to move on at the end of this, or during this free agency period, rather. So, Morgan, talk us through some of their pros and cons. Let's hear them.
Yeah, so they have a good amount of money to toss around in this draft, but they got to be careful of that cap space as well. So that's kind of like a hand-in-hand pro and con there. And then their needs, they're really just needing a little bit of help in their mid and defensive. So like a center back could be helpful. And then a left mid, left wing type player could be super helpful for them.
Certainly good choices. And again, regarding the cap space situation, we're hearing there is discontent rumbling among the center midfield of the Pink Nightmare. Eulogy Prestes, in particular, after his injury, missing most of last season, feels like he's no longer a part of the squad and has been left out of the manager's plan. So he is allegedly seeking a transfer himself, as he still has 2 years remaining on his deal. But a high-paid player certainly is eating up some cap space. We'll have to see if he has a future that lies away from this club. Either way, Ben, what are they looking to do here in the draft, do you think?
I think they definitely need to replace the gap that's left by Colton leaving the team. And so that could be any of those players in Jintek, Shin, or another player I wanted to highlight here at a similar draft position could be Cristóvão Ademir Vicente Serra out of Portugal. He could really inject some pace, some electricity, and some fire into this team that looks very strong defensively. They're able to tap the ball around, play a possession style game, but they really need to get some explosiveness out of the top, and he could bring that.
Yeah, certainly a sleeper pick that doesn't make a whole lot of people's draft boards, but we'll have to see. He does have some high upside. Another one of these talented Portuguese players. Have to see what the Pink Nightmare decide to do here. And moving on to another team in a similar position here, the Revenants, who again just cannot seem to beat the freaking Terminators in the playoffs. But another good season for them, and they re-signed Wallace Wellington. Morgan, what are some other good things they have going for them?
Which team were we talking about again?
That would be the Revenants.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. They have pretty good strengths here. I mean, they have good cap space and also their prestige. I mean, they're just a good team. They look good for players and fans alike. Their constraints, though, they really got to watch their transfer budget there. It's looking a little bit tough for them. So they'll need to keep an eye on that one. As far as needs, they're needing help kind of defensively, similar to a lot of other teams. They need a center back. They need a left back. And then lastly, they could really use a CDM or center mid type role.
Yeah, good call-outs. Again, Revenants had one of the strongest backlines in the entire league last season, but they do lose veteran backup defender Richard Sinclair to free agency, who's projected as one of the top free agents around the defensive position in the league. We'll have to see where he ends up. Lots of teams in the mix for his signature as well. But beyond that, as we mentioned, incredibly thin at the midfield position. Actually, only 2 midfielders on the entire roster in Jazargo Ramesses, who's projected to leave in a transfer potentially, as well as Milan Radovic. So, Ben, is that center midfield a role they could look to shore up with this number 15 pick here?
It's definitely got a lot of potential here, and the players that you could see them targeting could be Barca Haddad or Federico Mancini. Both are number 3 and number 4 ranked center mids, respectively. One is a little bit more of a striking, finishing center mid, and the other more pace, crossing, passing, getting balls to other players. So it really depends on what style of attack they want to see, if they want to go more defensive, possession, or more explosive attack.
Certainly good options, again, on the board still at this point. And now we move on to the Mayflowers, who had quite a run last season, becoming the first of the new 4 teams to make the playoffs. So congrats to them on that achievement. What a great season they had. Again, the resurgence of Levon Miller, one of the stories of the season for sure. But the Mayflowers, before we dive in, a classic testament to the draft not being the end-all be-all. They bring in a backup goalkeeper who many people thought were going to replace Miller as the starter, lit a fire under him and got him going, and he's a new man. Not only that, they actually traded their original pick with the Charioteers for a proven starter in Jan Giselman, and he has completely transformed that Mayflowers back line from being frail into quite rigid and stout. So all that to say, Morgan, tell us a little bit about what they have going for them heading into this season.
Yeah, I mean, they have a pretty good transfer budget, which will be helpful, but they also have a great cap space. So, I mean, that could be super, super helpful. But on the other side of that, their draft position, due to them ending pretty high at the end of the season, is pretty bad. It's not horrible, not great. And then also kind of what you're talking about, their prestige just isn't quite there. Although, I mean, they kind of proved themselves a little bit last season. So I don't necessarily think that it could be counted as one of their constraints. Now they're going to need some help in kind of in the mid to defensive range. So they need a center attacking mid and a center defensive mid if they're wanting to get back to the top like they did last season.
Yeah, we're hearing from sources around the league it's going to be highly dependent on the players available at this position. If they find a top 5 player in that midfield role, they might go for it. But if not, they may look to bring in a veteran player once again, as they did with Giselman in free agency. So, Ben, what's the strategy here? Do they bring in another midfielder in the draft like they did last year? Or maybe do they look to shore up those fullback positions or somewhere else across the back line? Or a little bit of both?
Yeah, I like the Mayflowers to make a big push to sign a splash player. I think they were rewarded for doing that last year, trading to get Jan Giselman from the Charioteers. And he wound up playing excellently last season, and as well as their wingbacks. Their fullbacks was the best fullback duo in the league last year, but they're getting up there in age, and you could see them looking to find the heir apparent and kind of maintain that top form. So if they manage to sign a strong midfielder, of which this free agent and transfer class is looking to be pretty robust, you could see them targeting players like Achim Neumann out of Germany, Darren Asunciao from Brazil, or even Pachacutic Colque out of Peru. Lots of potential here at this draft class to kind of bolster up those fullback positions.
Yeah, certainly some more project type players, but again, a high upside in all 3 of those guys and exciting talents they bring to the table. We enter now the final third of this draft, the last 8 selections. The Terminators leading off that category. Their streak of championships cannot extend to 3. It comes to an end at 2, but they still had a good season. Morgan, talk us through some of the positives and negatives around this franchise.
Yeah, I mean, the Terminators are just a good team. Everyone wants to watch them or be on their team, so their prestige is there. And then, of course, they have a great cap space, but they got to watch out. They do not have that much money just to throw around. So that might not hurt them because it looks like they don't really need much. I mean, they really only need a right mid or right wing to help on that right-hand side on the pitch.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation financially when you talk about it because, as you mentioned, they've got cap space, but yet they're having trouble getting their club captain, Ludwig Wrzowski, the anchor cornerstone of that back line, to get a new deal re-signed. So maybe the writing is on the wall a bit here, knowing how highly rated a player of his quality is around the league and knowing how badly they need that transfer budget and how much he's going to cost to renew. Might they look to move on from him? We'll have to wait and see. Beyond that, Ben, what are they looking to do here with this number 17 pick in the draft that you could think of?
I could see them looking to bolster the midfield, as a lot of teams have done. 2 players I want to highlight are Kelvin Akpan out of Nigeria and Aaron Sabula out of Kenya. 2 great African players with a lot of potential, very similar in stature and shape, both 5'10" and around a $160 in weight. Could really see them bolstering the midfield, which is getting older. Andrew Hearn, our Golden Boot winner, is also getting on the older side despite his meteoric rise. He's chasing records, chasing dreams, but they can look to try to replace him at the striker position as well down the road.
Yep, certainly areas across the field for the Terminators that could be improved with an aging squad, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Similar situation for the Manticores here, and they come in at our number 18 pick overall. Again, another one with an interesting situation developing here with Jonas Torierson. We saw it beginning last season with a little bit of it falling out on the field with the coach, having some disagreements about playing time and positional roles with the surprise addition of Dante Pop-Doof at the 11th hour, and that has really shaken things up. Have to see how his future plays out within the final year of his deal, and they did not get a re-signing done. So, Morgan, with that murkiness in the water, let's hear some good and bad things beyond that about this team, the Manticores.
I mean, I think really their only constraints are a little bit of that drama that they had, but they have a good transfer budget to work with, and they just look like an overall attractive team. So that will be helpful to attract some players. Their real needs here are a center back and a center defensive mid. So a little bit of that defensive need there.
Yeah, good call-outs as well. Again, as we mentioned with the Terminators, an aging back line to say the least. And goalkeeper, they might look to go there as well. Ben, what are your thoughts?
There's going to be a lot of goalkeepers left on the board at this point. Not a lot of these teams are linked to it, so they could look at Antonio Tarin out of Colombia. They could also be looking at Toby Baker or Marvin Prada out of England and Bolivia, respectively. Another player I've highlighted previously is Pachacutic Colque, center back out of Peru. They could use that to solidify that back line.
Yeah, again, certainly still good options available, even this low down in the first round of the draft. Lots of potential players. And it does become a bit of a game of best player available, so we'll have to wait and see what exactly happens here. Moving on to the scouts and approaching the business end, the back end of the draft here into the final 5. Number 19 pick, another impressive season for this team. But again, does feel a bit like they're letting some of this momentum slip. They've got to be careful. Again, they were runners up 2 seasons ago. This year, they go out in the divisional round to their rivals, the Thunderbirds. So they've got to find some ways to keep the momentum, the energy going, and, try and strike while this golden generation is still in its prime. Morgan, what are some strengths about this team that you see?
Yeah, I mean, even though they didn't quite make it to, the top like they have in the past season, they still have that prestige there. They're still one of the better teams in the league as of right now. And they also have a lot of money to work with. Their transfer budget is pretty good. Really, the real constraint for them is their draft position is pretty abysmal. So might be some slim pickings for them. And it seems like they could use a goalkeeper and a striker kind of to sandwich the pitch to maybe, if they get those players, clinch, getting into the semifinals or the runners-up like they have in the past.
Or maybe going all the way. We'll have to wait and see. A lot of time between now and then. But it's an interesting point you made. Again, Philip Miller leaving in free agency, and the Scouts, they don't feel like a team that needs a lot of players added. It's almost like they're just 1 or 2 really good players away from being one of, if not the best teams in the league. So, as you mentioned, Morgan, draft position is being as low as it could be. Ben, do you think a trade up is on the cards here for the Scouts in this kind of situation? And if so, who might they take, and who might they take if they don't trade up?
That's a great question, Matthew. I think if they don't trade up, Samar Benzai out of Algeria could be a great pick. He is a very high floor prospect, could really bolster that squad without a whole lot of investment from them, because really they don't have a ton of needs. But should they trade up, looking across the board, there's tons and tons of talent. Trying to see if there's anyone we haven't highlighted at this point. You could see them going goalkeeper here, looking for Marvin Prado, 22nd on our board, hoping to boast that position as well. We'll have to see, though, if Martin Prado beats his domestic violence charges that were put against him earlier this summer. So I'm watching that with a close eye.
Certainly an interesting situation developing. We'll have to see. Maybe the Scouts could go for the Mayflowers goal of bringing in a new goalkeeper to try and light a fire under the incumbent starter. We'll have to see what happens there.
That's correct.
Now, let's take a look at the Green Galaxy. Bit of a different situation here. Morgan, give us some highs and lows of this team real quick.
Yeah, so they have a decent amount of change to use in this draft, and also they're just a good team. They look really good. So that would be helpful, but they just have to watch their cap space. And also their draft position is really not that great. So they may not be able to get the best depth from this draft. Their needs. Oh.
Go on. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So their needs are a right back and a left back would be super helpful for them. And then a goalkeeper could be nice as well to have that, defensive and keeper strength could be, that one thing that tips them over the edge,
Yep. As I was about to say before I so rudely interrupted, all signs pointing to a quiet offseason for the Green Galaxy. But again, they are really struggling in that cap space, and they might need to let somebody get offloaded in order to free things up. With that in mind, Ben, what do you think they do here at this number 20 spot in the draft?
I think the Green Galaxy, whose success has largely been predicated off of excellent drafting in the past and just finding players who have just really maximized their potential, I think they're going to continue to do that, and I could see them trying to trade up here by any means necessary. They love a top 10 pick, and I could see them pursuing that and try to get a good, talented rookie on the cheap, and also hopefully offload some talent and sign something in the midfield to bolster that young replacement after letting Friedrichs go in this offseason.
Certainly don't have a proven track record of good selections in the draft and maybe looking to make another splash here in this one. We'll have to wait and see. It's all going to be unfolding in just a few short weeks, but let's head into our final four teams here. And now the Stealth, what a run they had, barely squeaking into the playoffs as the number 5 seed in the NSC and then making it all the way to the conference championship where they were defeated by their division rivals and eventual champions, the Utah Pioneers. What a run they had. That game against the Green Galaxy, fitting transition, was one of the best, if not the best, of the entire season. Let's hear about some other positive things they had going on for them right now. Morgan.
So you kind of really touched on like their main strength here, their prestige. I mean, they look very good. They did very well. They're an exciting team to watch. As far as their weaknesses, their draft position, of course, is not very good. And their cap space is something to be aware of. As far as their needs, though, not too much. They could use a center attacking mid or a goalkeeper could be nice as well.
They did do a good job of retaining their starters as well. 6 of them re-signed, which is a league high for players in a roster in one season re-signing. But you did highlight 2 key positions. They did draft center attacking mid last season with Ibai Viteri. What a signing he was as well. Rookie of the Year award. Ben, could they look to make another splash here at number 21, or are they going to look to maybe trade up? What do you think?
That's a great point. I think I could see them trading up after the success of this past season. I could really see them looking to reach for the stars and try to make a big push for another Soccer Bowl appearance or playoff appearance, that is. But if they were to hold course, I really like Iya Skunta out of Uganda here. I think that's a good midfielder that could really fit in well with their system. He's been linked to the team. I know they've been talking a lot, so we'll see where they wind up should they choose to hold course.
Good thoughts all around, guys. Heading into our final 3 here. The Kodiaks out of Alaska. What a season they had. And all thanks, well, not all thanks, but largely thanks to the giant free agent acquisition that was Christian Shona last season, who signed initially a short-term deal, but has re-signed a 3-year deal at the club and has gotten paid. So a testament to the draft, once again, being one of many avenues you can take to try and bolster your squad. Kodiaks proving that it doesn't have to be from the youth academy. Morgan, what are some of their strengths and weaknesses of this team who made it to the conference championship as well?
I mean, their strengths are, they made it to the championship, so they look pretty good. And the constraints consist of, we're seeing a real trend here, a draft position, bad, not great, and their cap space. But at the end of the day, it may not really hurt them that bad because all they really need is a left back.
Fair enough. And we saw last year, again, we mentioned Shona, the free agent signing, but they did draft a right back last year in Carlin Eastman, who was a standout defender, a day 1 starter. Ben, could they look to do the same thing again this year on the opposite side of the back flank?
Yes, I think they could. And in that case, they're definitely going to be targeting Akeem Neumann out of Germany or Kendero Moylands out of England. Both backs who could fill in on the opposite side of Eastman, looking to build a youthful and potent fullback situation there in Alaska.
We'll turn our attention now to the final 2 teams, the Soccer Bowl contestants. The first of, and unfortunately the runner-up, the Thunderbirds, the oldest club in the league, returning to their pedestal atop the throne of greatness and coming oh so close to claiming the crown once again. Came up just short, Morgan. Let's hear about their strengths and weaknesses.
For the Pioneers or the Thunderbirds?
Thunderbirds.
Their strength, transfer budget's there. They got a lot of money. Their cap space is good. And also they just look real good as one of, the OG teams. Everyone loves the Thunderbirds. As far as their constraints, draft position is kind of doo-doo. So they don't really need anything, though. Their needs, we even have here none. They do not need a single thing. So their draft position being kind of doo-doo, as I said, is not really that bad. Just because they don't really need anyone. At this point, It's just to help with depth.
Yeah, certainly a lot of good things going for them, despite that heartbreaking loss in the championship game. Did have some high-profile free agents, long-term tenured members of the team like Camaro Washington and Miguel Ramirez leave the squad, though. So, Ben, does that affect maybe their selection here or not at all? What do you think?
I think their squad is deep enough that they're going to go best player available at this position. So that being said, best fits are probably Asun Xiao, Johnny Evans, or Iya Yaskunta. And any one of those three, or really just whatever player happens to fall, because these drafts, they do get hairy. They're going to take whoever's there. Seeing as they did get,
Fair enough. Well, that is about it for us, but we've got one more team, the champions, the Utah Pioneers, and what a season they had. It's not been all roses and lollipops in the offseason, though. Had some issues getting these players to re-sign. Emigio Cairo and Saratobi, the regular season MVP and the Soccer Bowl MVP, respectively, both stalling on a new deal despite being champions. What a strange situation. Morgan, maybe you can shed some light on this with the strengths and weaknesses of this team to give us some insight as to what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, their strengths, they look good, much like all these other teams at the top. Obviously, they're the golden winners of last season, and they have a lot of money, so that's great. But their draft position, not really that great, and their cap space, also not that great. Their needs too, they kind of need a little bit of depth here, which is not great due to their lack of good draft position. So they do need a left mid, left wing type player, center back, a center attacking mid, or a center forward could be helpful. And then lastly, a goalkeeper could be nice as well.
Well said again, Morgan. Thanks for all your insights today. Ben, get us across the finish line. What are you thinking in the draft for these guys?
As Morgan said, I think left mid is going to be the pick here, and that means we got to key in on Artem Gilyadzudanov out of Russia. He's a very talented young player, definitely lower on the draft board, but still not lacking in ability. He's going to be a consistent finisher, and he's going to be able to find ways to get to the goal quickly and easily and be able to make those tap-ins without any threat. He's been slicing and dicing up defenders this side of Moscow, so we'll see what he could do in the National Soccer League.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but not too long. Thankfully, just a few short weeks away. Again, mark your calendars, everyone. August 2nd, that's a Saturday at 7:30 p.m. The first round and the first pick will kick off in the official first step of our new National Soccer League season, which is right around the corner. Morgan, Ben, thank you all for your time today. This concludes our pre-draft analysis and coverage. We will see you all in just a little while for the draft. Until then, bye for now.
Yeah!